who is going to be held accountable for submitting a report that was costed at half the price, roughly, that apparently it ought to have been costed at a week ago? You know,
well, first of all, these people aren't going to be around 30 years from now.
That's the other thing. So it's again, you're putting into place plans. We could, gosh, I wish I had the plan in front of me, because then we could be making fun of all of the specific, like I said, the plans.
If we can get a copy of the plan, there's always next week.
Yeah, well, that's true enough, Nick. True enough. Maybe that's what we should do. But it's just, I'm trying to be respectful to a certain degree of, people's concerns about the environment, etc. I don't think it's a bad thing, Nick, to be environmentally conscientious. But holy moly, okay, what do you guys want to do? I still want to scream.
You know what you and I are going to do in the studio is we're going to take some brick and some mortars, and we're making a wall about 5 feet long by about 6 feet high and 2 bricks thick. And whenever we get to this point, we're just going to turn our bang our head against the wall. Because what else do you do? How else do you explain this? You know something? You're going to see the most insane kind of nonsense come out of this plan. I don't know what's in it either, but it's to a point it doesn't really matter. Because first of all, it will have zero impact on the climate.
Of course.
It is going to do nothing but cost taxpayer. Return on investment? Are you kidding? Nobody in their right mind would invest in this. Not without a huge subsidy like, buying a Tesla, $14,000 taxpayers' money.
Where did you get that? Where did you get that return on investment term from? That was just something you pulled out of the air?
Well, no, that's when people think something is a good idea and they want to get involved, they tend to invest in it with their money.
I immediately looked at the chat room to see who was defending this on return on investment. Okay, because Nick, I'm going to jump all over that, okay? No. Governments don't invest money. This is not they say investment, but it's all smoke and mirrors, okay? Governments, they spend money, but not as investments, okay? You don't invest in wind power. You're not going to have a return on investment. There is no investment, okay? It's a straight up expenditure, period. That's all. Okay, so I hate it when I hear governments talk about investments. We're going to invest in clean energy. No, you're going to spend money trying to set up a clean energy, quote unquote, industry. There's no such thing as investment here. If you're a private sector and you invest money and you expect to have a return on that investment, that's a different thing. But when you're subsidizing an industry, that's not investment. We're investing in our future. No, you're not. You're not investing in your future. It's a misuse of the term.
Sorry. Well, you're totally right. I mean, it's enough to drive you crazy, because how do you look the taxpayer in the eye and say your taxes are going to go up by X amount when they're already at, wondering how they're going to pay last year's tax bill? And we need this because we want to stop the earth from, we want to stop climate change.
At exactly the time when businesses are being shut down again by governments in reaction to, the increase in the number of positive cases of COVID-19 infections. Of course, nobody even hits the pause button and says, okay, well, how many of those increased infections are actually due to outbreaks, or they're due to increase in the testing? If you double the number of tests that you're going to have, then you're going to double the number of cases of infection that you're going to find. And, of course, most of these people don't end up in the hospital. They don't even end up being sick. They're just being reported that way. And it's Nick,
it's madness is what it is.
I am so fed up with the stupidity of government the stupidity of people that we have in government today. It's maybe I shouldn't be talking this way, because I deal with them, and you have to be careful. I don't want to be insulting in that, but can you please and thank you behave like you passed grade school? Please.
Well, something, there's another element to this that we haven't touched on yet, and that is that ultimately we get the government we deserve, and that partly because of the fact the government runs the education system, I get that, but people have lost their ability to think critically, and they keep electing and rewarding people who blatantly lie to us. And until and unless we stop that, at every level of government, especially the lower levels, as you many times pointed out before, where this behavior is learned, if you're not going to, if people won't act ethically with the dollar, there's no reason to believe they'll act ethically with 1,000 or 100,000 or 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000, because it's not about the amount. It's about what you do with it on somebody else's behalf. And that's where the ethics all falls apart. We talked about this last week. So when you look at the electorate, it's the people in Canada who vote for this stuff, thinking that if I vote for this stuff and I pay my fair share, if I ever hear that phrase again, it'll be too soon, because we're already paying more than our fair share. But the government keeps telling us this lie. You need to pay your fair share. Well, just exactly how much is fair? Do you want half of it? Do you want 75% of my income? Do you want it all? Show me where the line is, and they won't do it. So a lot of it is the fault of the electorate that just keeps voting for these kinds of politicians who enact these kinds of legislation. And it's certainly not our listeners. They're a lot smarter than that. But the average guy walking down the street, with a ballot in his hand, is just looking for the next handout, and whoever gives it to him, that's who's going to get his vote. And tragically, that's the way it is.
Well, the frog and the hot water story, right?
Yes.
And I'm starting to feel like that's what we are. We're frogs, and we've been swimming around in a pot of cold water, and somebody's turned the heat on, and the heat here is slowly getting hotter and hotter in this pot. But, being frogs, we're just going to continue to swim around and around and around until we boil to death, okay? And that's where we're at with the over-regulation, over-taxation, and dare I say it, because I've defended publicly and privately, mask wearing in response to this pandemic. I don't necessarily agree with the mask mandate, but I don't think it's a bad idea that people wear masks. But what we've done in the last 6 months, 4 months, is we've created this. What am I trying to say here? This culture of petty dictatorship, and it's all over us. And there's no sense of reality to the schemes that our elected officials are coming up with. There's no sense of reality with respect to how they're going to get the money to pay for it. So they borrow because they're afraid of raising taxes, because who wants to pay more taxes, right? So we've become totally addicted with this borrowing, literally mortgaging the future of our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, who are going to be left paying the bill for things that they don't want and don't care for, probably. And then, gosh, if you're not wearing a mask in a public store, not just if you're not wearing your mask, but if you're not wearing it properly. Here, I don't know if there's a farm here locally outside of Ottawa, and they put on this stuff, a Halloween thing every year. I might be a pumpkin hunt. I don't know the details of it, but what I do know is that they had about 30 or 40 people, however many people, attending this function, on a field, Nick, that's 100 acres. Okay?
Okay.
100 acres. But because it was 100 acres, which was a unit, okay, and they had more than 25 people, the bylaw enforcement officers came in and apparently fined these guys $3,000.
$3,000.
$3,000 fine. Yeah. Now I'm gonna have to get details of this. Maybe we could talk about this next week. But what are we doing, people? I'm not a revolutionary, but it's time now for us to say to the government, okay, you know what, stop it. We're going to have a federal election pretty soon. We have to insist on candidates that are going to have some common sense, and we have to vote, you know, whatever political party they are. We have to get rid of people who are just big utopian schemers that have no common sense. And by golly, you know, we've got to do something about our local governments as well, because they are just out of control, Nick. Just out of control.
There is no question. Well, I mean, it was one thing. It used to be you could have a different mindset about how to run an organization. And as long as it was something you felt was benefiting the organization overall, that's fine. Okay, that's just a different way of looking through the same glass and coming up with a different answer. And I don't have any problem with that. But those days are long gone. Now it's a competing ideas that if enacted, if people actually go out and put these policies into practice, like $57 billion over 30 years, will be at the very least hugely damaging, if not downright destructive, to the organization they're trying to run, in this case, the City of Ottawa. It's true at every governmental level, whether it be here in Canada or the United States. It is that time, isn't it? Okay, well, let me just wrap it up by saying the competing ideas now are not about how to best serve the country. It's about how to best get their agenda put forward, and I think that's terrible.
Okay, sorry, I was waiting for Nick to take us into a break. I'll do it. No problem.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Nick. Just one of those pregnant pauses. This is one of the glitches when we're, not sitting around face to face here throwing paper airplanes at one another. Anyway, we'll be back in a few minutes if you're listening to the live show. And if you're listening to the podcast, then you will catch us tomorrow morning, U.S. Election Day. So you do not want to miss that podcast. And if you're listening to the show live, you don't want to miss the next segment. So we'll be back in a minute or two here on the Nick and Joe Show on ThinkRadio.ca.